I'm Ali Patterson. On this programme, we're going to be looking at security, fraud and cybercrime. We've assembled a selection of experts with representatives from Cisco, LV and Frank Abagnale Jr. I also wanted to have a look at what we faced firsthand, so with a bit of help, we managed to track down 3 white hat hackers. Last week, I gave each hacker my name and assigned each of them a current account, a credit card and an insurance provider. There was very little funds in all of these accounts. Hacker 1 in the UK had my current account with HSBC, my credit card with RBS, and my home insurance with the Halifax. Hacker number 2, also in the UK, had my Santander current account, my Barclaycard credit card, and my travel insurance with LV, which was expired. Hacker number 3 in Estonia had my Lloyd's current account, my Sainsbury's credit card, and my Pet Plan pet insurance. They each had 1 week to gather as much information on me as they possibly can. We'll find out later how they did. So firstly, I headed over to Cisco to speak to James Kronk and Philippe Rogerband to talk about the threat from cybersecurity.
So even though I'm from a products company, I always say it's not a products issue. The whole thing is more about governance, risk and compliance. And what I mean by that, in terms of governance, it's having the right policies put in place, understanding what assets you have to protect, what needs to be done to protect them, what are the access rights that you're going to be granting to certain people in terms of IT resources based on their job role, based on their context as well. And that should be the starting point. And it's based on those policies that you can then define the processes that allow you to deal with the incidents and the breaches, not if they happen, when they happen, because they will be happening. Then the third element, which is key as well, is part of what we could often refer to as GRC, so governance, risk and compliance.
Yeah, what I find quite interesting is, given the critical nature of banks and banking in particular, is that there's no compliance stipulations at an industry level. You will find certain sovereign countries have certain regulations that have to be implemented by the banks, but unless a bank is a critical infrastructure provider, there is nothing which is actually regulated for them. So it really is, it's best practice, it's guidance, it's how they view things themselves and how they would like to implement in the case of any particular security issues that they think are top of mind. I think there's got to be a way that we've got to get to something which is a little bit more consistent across the industry, but we're not there yet.
Between the ages of 15 and 21, Frank Abagnale became one of the most prolific comms people in history. When Spielberg made Catch Me If You Can, he said he waited so long since acquiring the rights to see what the real Frank Abagnale Jr. would do with his life. Now one of the world's leading security consultants, I speak with him about cybercrime and fraud. What are some of the biggest challenges that banks and financial service firms are facing at the moment?
I think probably the 2 biggest things right now are certainly breaches. We're having an enormous amount of breaches, almost one every day. Some you don't hear about, some obviously some very big breaches. And that's not just banks, that's any company that keeps data. So law firms, doctors, medical firms, healthcare providers, insurance providers, anyone that has data and people want that information about individuals. So I would think that breaches, one, are very deadly in the fact that even if you don't lose any money, the reputation of your company and the fact that information has been stolen about your clients or your customers is devastating to one's stock and one's brand and reputation. The other thing would be a lot of account takeover, or a lot of where we're seeing repeat, where a CFO sends an email to wire X amount of money to a certain client or a customer, and someone does that exact email over again and a replay of that email or that wire transfer. Those things are becoming more and more common. Again, they don't get publicly made a lot because banks don't want to claim they lost the money, but sometimes very substantial amounts of money have been done on replays.
LV are one of the UK's leading insurers at the forefront against fraud. I spoke with Martin Milliner to see how they would tackle this issue. What's the most important thing that a financial firm can do at the moment to ensure their customers' safety and security?
With the threat of cybercrime, I think it is, people have to take a risk-based approach. So you've got to look at, on a national level, what the country is doing. There's recently been a publication by the Metropolitan Police around tightening the net. I think there's some good insights into there, which probably lead us to conclude maybe at a national level we're not necessarily prepared for the next 5 to 10 years and the potential threats on the horizon. I think if you look across the Atlantic, back in 2013, I think President Obama gave a speech where he was pulling together basically the public and the private sectors to create a joint approach to solving this issue. And I think at the moment probably the industry needs to get together with government and work more closely to tackle this across the public and private sectors, and at the same time obviously look to the future as to see what is on the horizon in terms of cybercrime and the potential risks that lay ahead. One of the areas of concern is that many people in the industry are probably using legacy systems and legacy technologies, which probably at the time were fit for purpose, but for today are probably more vulnerable to cybercrime and hacking and various other external pressures that maybe require additional investment. In times where capital is hard to perhaps invest in, the choices for the industry are pretty stark in a sense of do you invest in defending your data, defending your security, or invest in your products and your portfolio to grow the business. But from a regulatory perspective, you've got to put your customer first and that security above all else.
I went to speak further about how fraud prevention works in real time with Amit Shah from NICE Systems.
Yeah, so at NICE we've, over the past few years, we've actually revolutionised how customers authenticate themselves when calling into their call centres. So effectively taking the burden away of being asked millions of questions. So when, for example, you call your bank and you ask your account number and then your mother's maiden name and your character 2 and 3 of a password, we've effectively tried to take that away. So the real-time authentication is leveraging voice biometrics to actually use a person's voice when calling an agent and using that as an identity and authenticating them using that voice. Obviously, as technology has been used in kind of military and defence over the years, but it's very much come to the fore now in industry and enterprises, which can now use the actual technology. Essentially what it does is takes a person's voice recording and converts a voice print. So it's like your digital signature. So once that digital signature is stored, next time you call into your bank or telecom provider, it recognises, as soon as you claim who your identity is, that it's Ali who's calling. Once you claim who you are, it matches your voice that in real time against the voice print that's on file, and once the match is proven, then it's a green light. Yeah, it's fully tested, so it's the only biometric which can be used remotely, whereas the other biometrics we are physically holding on to. So, for example, your iris and your fingerprints. One may have thought that the fingerprint is far more accurate, but in fact the voice has got over 80 characteristics, which makes it very powerful, unique and accurate. We've tested the solution on a set of twins which exist in our company, so where the mother cannot identify which twin is which, and systems able to actually identify. It actually picks on these two things, on behavioural and physical characteristics, and again, so it's not just the way you speak and how you speak, so it picks all those different criteria measurements and then produces a result. From a solution perspective, it's language independent, text independent, so it's all about being free and speaking in a natural course of conversation. So you don't have to remember any specific passphrases. You could be conversing in English or any other language, so it's very, very agile and adaptable. We can use it, deploy it within organizations. If you can imagine, we've got tons and tons of millions of recordings of people's voices, and granted, once you have the consent, we can actually leverage those recordings to passively generate those voice prints in the background without any customer effort. So the customer doesn't need to be burdened with dialing into a system and generating a voice password, should I say. So everything's done very passively in the background, and once it's all up and running, you're all set to go.
What is the most important thing a financial services firm can do to ensure their own security?
Well, one, to educate their employees and train them. It's always interesting when the bank, financial institution cuts back, the first thing they cut back is security, where they have the most to lose. So to me, it's very important to bring back training programs, constantly educating your employees and letting them aware of what's going on is one of the best things you can do. And then, of course, having the proper software and firewalls and things that are necessary inside the bank to protect that information. The other thing is passwords. Banks really don't do a lot to tell their customers to use good passwords. So I did a research project a few years ago of what was called the ROC 10 breach. And it was the first time we had the opportunity to look at 250,000 passwords used by the customers of Rock 10. The most common password, number one, was 12345. The fourth most common password was the word password. And I'm sure in Great Britain it's going to be a soccer team's name in a certain part of the country or something else. That is their password. So if I breach a bank and I get into the bank and simply say, give me everything with 12345, I'm going to pick up thousands of accounts. So I always think it's important for a bank to educate their customers about coming up with passwords that are difficult to figure out, made up of both letters and numbers, something that you can remember, but that's something that makes it very difficult for someone to compromise. And when you say we had a breach, change your password. I'm amazed when people say, those people had a breach, you're still using the same password. That's ridiculous. You need to change your password. But again, a lot of times they don't even tell the customer change your password, even though they know a breach has occurred.
In my opinion, I think it's all about education for an organization. They need to actually make customers aware about actual fraud threats which are taking place, ensure best practices are followed when one receives emails, one receives phone calls. How does the organization interact with their customers via emails, via phone calls, so that customers are fully aware, so they don't expect the unexpected. For example, a fraudster calls in, trying to gain information via the phone call, pretending to be a bank employee. It's all around awareness, not only just about putting relevant solutions in place to actually protect their customers and transactions and systems, but also making awareness to the public and their customers.
How important a role do you think white hat hackers play in the fight against cybercrime?
I think white hat hackers are a great sort of, putting a mirror to your face and reflecting back on you in a more direct way, the risks that potentially are there. I think it's helpful to inform you, but it probably only tells you what you may already know in a sense of maybe putting your head in the sand kind of reactions to some of the threats that are out there. That could happen to somebody else, but will never happen to me kind of a feeling about it. We're all right, we're safe. But I think what it does do is kind of look at that wider scope of threat in a sense of where along your sort of process or supply chain or where you hire in people, where is the risk actually sitting? There's a kind of a cause and effect to some of these things where, in a sense of, looking at your processes from end to end, when you engage with your supply chain, you may have the right processes up front, but how do you know that they're following the same sort of thread as you are? Are they recruiting into the same standards, doing the same checks as you are when you hire your own people? When they're out there with customers in the field, for example, what are they actually personally doing? How can they access data that perhaps they shouldn't be? Criminals are always one step ahead, whether that be one step ahead of car manufacturers when you can have the most secure vehicle in the world, but they'll come up with some way of disrupting the key fob when it tries to lock your car, or they'll be scanning the vehicle for signs of an iPad being stuck in the boot or a mobile phone or iPod in your vehicle. There's always a one step ahead nature, and evolution means there's always a cause and effect to that. So I suppose for me it's a question of the white hat hackers will almost be a fortune teller for you as a business, creating an opportunity for you to be more proactive in defending your data, and instead of being reactive when somebody gets caught out and then gets fined by the FCA as a consequence.
Quite a number of things that an organization like Cisco can do. It doesn't start with technology, it starts small with processes, policies, so obviously we can provide services as well to assess a customer's or a client's vulnerability level, help him to design his policies. But I think there's one thing that we're doing that I think is really something that is useful to the whole community. We've got this organization called Talos, a group of 600 engineers spread around the world, working in follow the sun mode, so in 3 different centers. Their day job is to analyze data that they collect from sensors deployed in customer environments, but more globally on the internet. On a daily basis, these guys analyze more traffic than Google sees. It gives you an idea of the volume. It's in terabytes. It's absolutely gigantic. What this allows us to do is to be, in most cases, slightly ahead of the attacks taking place. We detect indicators of compromise, we detect the attacks that are building up, we detect their sources, and we share this information with our customers.
I think the other thing that we're very good at doing is understanding what's going on in the industry as a whole. And that's not just within the financial services practice, but also how my counterparts are dealing with this type of issue within manufacturing, within transportation, etc. And I think it's the consolidation of all those best practices that we can actually start providing some assistance and guidance to customers. One of the leading European financial organizations, we are now effectively managing a lot of their threat defense. There's almost an outsource to Cisco in terms of you manage that end-to-end and make sure that we're actually providing the level of defense that they need as an organization. And obviously, as part of that, I think another key value out of Cisco is the fact that we're not siloed within the network itself. We have a thorough understanding of everything from the network through the data center, through the collaboration space, into virtualization and into the cloud. I mean, that's one of the key features of Cisco's value proposition, is that we are not siloed in any one respect. And so having that end-to-end viewpoint is going to be absolutely critical to any organization looking for a partner to come in and help secure the end-to-end environment within that particular institution itself. What does that mean? I suppose, you've got to look at it that Cisco have got to become their number one secure IT partner.
The results are in from the 3 hackers. Hacker number 1 was able to find my 16-digit card number, an account number, and my sort code, as well as sending me a screenshot from my online banking. With RBS, he was able to find my 16-digit card number, my credit limit, and a history of my credit limit. And with Halifax Insurance, they found the date of my insurance start, as well as my policy number. Hacker number 2 managed to find the 16-digit card number of my Santander current account, my account number, my sort code, my overdraft limit, and a picture of my verification image. With Barclaycard, they were able to discover my 16-digit card number and my credit limit. And with LV Insurance, they were able to find the date of my insurance start, the policy number, and how much I'm paying for my insurance. Hacker number 3 was able to find out the same details for my Lloyds current account, credit card, and my pet plan, and all hackers were able to find my full name, my date of birth, my place of birth, and my address history for 3 years. Hacker number 3 did something quite interesting, as they were able to show me a copy of my driver's license.
That's my driver's license.
I have no doubt in my mind that the majority of this information was acquired through my email or Dropbox, but it does highlight how important it is to keep your information safe. I asked Frank for some advice for keeping me safe online.
Well, in my early career, I was creating checks. And back then, there were very few security features on checks. There might have been a watermark paper, it was about it. Over the years, a lot of security features were developed into paper, things like void panographs and holograms and things of that nature that didn't exist back then. So those technologies make it much more difficult to do today because they're difficult to get the equipment to print them, difficult to have the technology and the ability to do it. So that put down a great deal of the problem of counterfeiting. And then came along software, which allowed banks to use what we call positive pay, that every check that's written, the company sends to the bank overnight. Here's all the checks I wrote, here's who I wrote them to, here's the amount, here's the check number. When the checks come into the bank, they have to match that list that was sent to the bank. Otherwise, they don't pay the check. So those technologies like positive pay, plus the physical things that have been put on checks, have put a big dent in the ability to forge and counterfeit and replicate checks and documents. So those things would have made it much more difficult for me back then had they existed back then.
Do you think that, obviously, I know it's very different in the United States compared to Europe, but do you think that check fraud is very much at the lowest it can possibly be at the moment?
Well, in the US, it's still about $20 billion a year because, again, technology has made it easier now to sit down at a laptop and put a diagram of a check up, go to a corporate logo, capture their logo, put it on the check, go to the bank's corporate website, capture their logo, put it on the check, and replicate a check. Or do a bank take over an account where I just get your account number and then print checks with your account number on them and write checks against your account. So there's still check forgery going on. And there's still checks. People always ask me when we're going to see the paperless society. I always tell them when you see the paperless toilet, no time soon. So we'll be dealing with checks for many, many years to come yet in many countries around the world. But there obviously technology is getting better, and we are constantly developing things to make it more difficult for people to commit those crimes. So you have to stay one step ahead of the criminal and make things. And of course, when you develop a technology just like the 41st, you can't just say, oh, I developed it and I walk away. You have to always constantly go back and make it better, because someone's always going to be trying to attack it, find a weakness in it. And when you start to see those things, you want to be able to go back. And it's like a chess game. You just constantly play chess back and forth and try to make sure you protect your side.